Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face while you're sleeping. What if I told you that a lot of the superpowers comic book superheroes possess really do exist in real life? Yeah, believe it or not, superpowers are not just the works of fiction, TV series, and the overly dramatic superpowers use a greater way than you childhood. But Nong Yo Hui, night vision. This young boy from a remote village in China was born with sky blue eyes, like those of a Siamese cat. His parents have black-colored eyes, as did their parents before them. As such, everyone was amazed to see that their son, Nong Yo Hui, had brilliant blue eyes. What's remarkable is that the boy's eyes turn a reflective neon green when a light is flashed on them. You only see this characteristic in cats and other nocturnal animals. But Nong Yoi, like cats, is able to see in the dark. In nocturnal animals, enhanced night vision is made possible by a layer of specialized cells at the back of the eyes, which act as retroreflectors. Basically, this means that any light that goes through the eye is reflected back through the retina, thereby presenting additional light for illuminating things in the dark. While Nong Yoi lacks these specialized cells, he does have the ability to see in very small quantities of light. This was proven in a test in which the boy had to fill out a questionnaire while sitting in a dark room. Number 9. Brock Brown, Incredible Hulk. This kid from Michigan was 5 foot 2 inches when he was still in kindergarten. At the age of 19, the boy measured an imposing 7 feet 8 inches. But most remarkably, Brock Brown never did stop growing. His growth rate was measured at 6 inches per year. You need a stool if you wish to take his measurement. If you're a fan of Dr. Bruce Banner, you immediately think of the Hulk when you see how remarkably tall and heavily built Brock Brown is. The boy is soft-spoken and has a big heart. Nothing like Bruce Banner's alter ego, Hulk. Unfortunately, unlike Dr. Banner, this kid cannot transform from giant to a regular-sized teen. He's always going to order size 28 shoes and tailor-made clothes. He's always going to be the tallest person in the room wherever he goes. Number 8. Nikolai Kayagliachenko, Magneto. Nikolai was just a regular kid in Russia, and there was nothing you'd say was special about the boy. Ouch. But everything changed when the 12-year-old was knocked out by a massive electric shock from a faulty wire dangling from the lamppost he had been leaning on. The jolt of the electricity from the shock almost killed him, but the boy survived. And later, it came almost as a relief when he realized that the accident had given him some sort of superpowers. Metallic objects could stick to his skin as if he was Michael Fassbender, X-Men's Magneto. The boy, who is a keen fan of comics, wanted to be a policeman, but changed his career goal to a superhero after seeing that he gained some superpowers. What an interesting story, but some scientists didn't buy it. As far as they know, the boy simply had unusually sticky skin. This boy can hold a frying pan up with no other contact but his chest. Is that magnetism or really sticky skin? Number 7. Deepak Jungra, Electro. You'll see this boy from India touch a live wire with his tongue and think he must have a death wish. But the reality is that Deepak Jungra is able to withstand up to 11,000 volts. This is the amount of electricity only accessible through a high-voltage overhead transmission line. So, if a 110-volt or 240-volt shock can cause internal burning or fibrillation, imagine how much damage can be done by a supply that's 100 times that of your normal household voltage. But this kid doesn't seem to get shocked or any form of damage from electricity. The first time he released that he was able to withstand a lot of electric power flowing through his body, he was excited and wanted to know how much electricity he could take. He would fill a bucket with water, toss in a live wire from a 440-volt supply, then he'd put his hand in the water, but nothing would happen to him. Everyone in the village was obviously amazed by his superpower and even started calling him Electro. But no one anticipated that the boy would actually climb up an electric pole to touch a high-voltage 11K volt wire, just to see how much his body could take. Well, now there's no doubting that he's a real human electricity insulator. Number 6. Yang Jinlong, Super Strength. An amazing footage of a 7-year-old boy from a countryside province in China went viral when it showed the pint-sized boy pulling a 2-ton vehicle. The boy weighed only 110 pounds, but he was growing remarkably fast. He'd challenge himself to some hard and demanding feats to see how strong he was getting. The kid was obviously gifted, and he used his superpowers to do more than just towing vehicles. You need your heavy wheat or cement stacks loaded onto a truck? Yang Jinglong will sling those 220-pound sacks on his back and have them loaded wherever you need them. Well, of course, you cannot employ him just yet since he's still a kid, but the fact that he's a kid carrying 220-pound bags without breaking a sweat is impressive. Yang's most incredible feat of strength has to be the moments when he's seen carrying his 198-pound father around their home. You bet he'd beat all his friends at tug-of-war. Number 5. Nandana Muni Krishna, mind reader. Medical experts from around the world were amazed by this little girl who was reported to have telepathic abilities. Nandana was just 7 years old when her extraordinary ability first appeared. When word got out that the girl could access her mother's thoughts without touching her or using any other physical medium, her story caught the attention of thousands of people around the world. Nandana's parents were just as baffled by everyone else, as they were curious to see if their daughter could read the minds of other people, just as she did her mother's. But it turned out that she had this special connection only with her mother. As expected, Nandana's extraordinary superpowers were put to the test. The girl's mother was given several items to read silently in her mind. Among them was a cell phone number, a random sentence, and a grade 2 level poem which Nandana had never come across apparently. The girl passed all the tests and proved to the world that she could in fact access her mother's thoughts and emotions, a superpower which her mother says has strengthened their mother-daughter bond. Number 4. Liam Hoekstra, super strong toddler. Liam's extraordinary strength was first evident when he was just a toddler. At only 5 months old, the boy was doing the iron cross and would pace up the stairs and walk down unsupported. 1-year-old Liam was playing with 5-pound dumbbells, throwing them across the house like they were paperweight. And he dominated the chin-up bar as well. The boy's story is quite an interesting one, with the kind of twist DC Comics special creators use to introduce new superhero characters. As a toddler, Liam's mother gave him up for adoption when she thought her kid had some kind of birth defect. He was soon adopted, and his adoptive parents had a medical checkup done, because they thought that the boy appeared to be too strong for a toddler. The report revealed that Liam was born with a rare myostatin condition known as muscle hypertrophy. This means that their baby boy would develop more muscle mass and have little to no body fat. Basically, this means that the boy would always be muscular, without having to do much to keep it up. Number 3. Boris Preprivianovic, peculiar alien boy. He's a kid who's not from Earth. That's right, Boris, also nicknamed Borishka, has puzzled experts and thousands of people like you by claiming that he was a Martian before he was born to his Earth-dwelling human parents. The boy's knowledge of the planet Mars was impressive, and he seemed to understand a lot of things about the galaxies. Too much for a boy who was only 3 years of age. Borska claimed that he acquired all that knowledge from his past life on Mars, and that he remembers a great deal of it. He often talked about his life before he was born on Earth. He would especially talk of how life on Mars was before an all-out war broke out. He claimed that the war destroyed Martian civilization, and everyone on the planet had to seek shelter underground. Not sure if that's a superpower, but the fact that he could remember his past life as an alien, who knows what other abilities he could unlock in the future. He could be a real-life Superman for all you know. Now it's time for today's best pick. We have a picture sent to us by a subscriber, just like you. It shows an adorable little girl who seems to be showing off flames of fire coming off of her bare hands. Number 2. Emma Tablate, fire starter. This girl isn't on fire, but she can set things on fire with the power of her mind. She is a 3-year-old girl from the antique province of Western Visayas in the Philippines. She was leading what you'd say is a normal childhood until people started
I had sex and a condom fell out. What? Let's get
associating her to fires that would start wherever she went. And it was not something the local community took lightly. The police had to cordon off the house where she stayed with her parents as they investigated the matter. It was when the mayor of the town visited the home that the girl's abilities turned heads. Apparently, the girl said that something was going to catch on fire while the mayor was still in the house, and not long afterwards, a shirt hanging in the house caught fire. All the girl had to do to start the fire was to utter the word "Songnyeong," Filipino for fire, and something would burn. Kind of like what Daenerys Targaryen would command her dragons. Only with Emma Tablet, there is no fire-breathing dragons. What she has is a psychic ability known as pyrokinesis. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you'll get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it. It really works. Number 1. Anna Bellish, Archery. Remember Oliver Queen from the hit series Arrow? Like a host of other well-known superheroes from the Hunger Games and the Avengers, his extraordinary mastery of archery has somehow led to the rebirth of archery these days. Now, here's a 19-year-old girl whose prowess with the bow and arrow wowed thousands of people around the world. The girl from Russia is a gifted acrobat as well as an avid archer. Some of the stunts she performs call for an extraordinary level of flexibility, which takes time and dedication to practice and master. Anna Belsh's superpower is sort of like the Playboy vigilante, Oliver Queen. She became an overnight sensation when a video was uploaded showing her shooting an arrow with the bow in her feet as she stood on her hands. She nearly hit a bullseye. You made it to the end of the video, but hey, we'd love to see you again. If you click the subscribe and bell icons, we'll always notify you when a fantastic video just like this one comes up. We have a lot more that you will enjoy.
These used cars may look identical, but with Carfax, you'll see how a car's history.
If you walk into a supermarket or an all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant, it's easy to get blown away by the sheer selection of foods. In America, if you want something to eat and have the cash, odds are you can find it. But that's not always the case. Some iconic foods are actually illegal in America. If you try to sell or import these foods, you could wind up having your goods seized by the government and facing fines or even jail time in some cases. Some are dangerous to the eater, some are banned for conservation reasons, and some are just flat out shocking. But the one thing they all have in common, they're not going to be on the shelves anytime soon. But the first in this list might be a fond childhood memory for many. Number 20, Kinder Surprise Chocolate Eggs. A tasty treat imported from Italy, these desserts are a candy and a toy in one. The rich milk chocolate shell covers a plastic egg, similar to the ones hidden in Easter egg hunts. When the happy child eats the chocolate shell and opens the egg, they find a mystery toy inside. This made many kids very happy, but it wasn't without its risks. Authorities were worried about the toy being a choking hazard, and U.S. policies ban any candy from containing a non-nutritive object. So the Kinder Egg was banned in America despite protests, and the Ferrero Company issued a new version for Americans without the plastic egg and toy. But what's the fun in that? The next entry was also a sweet treat, but it hid its danger much more effectively. Number 19, Cognac Jelly Cups. Remember those Jell-O cups you used to get in your lunch? Popular in Japan, Cognac jelly cups look similar but come in smaller portions that can be slurped in one go. Made from a root, it's popular for being extremely low in calories and having a firmer consistency than most gelatin-based desserts. They come in multiple flavors and often have bits of coconut embedded in them. But the low calories come with a dangerous drawback. Because they're slow to dissolve and it's easy to suck down the whole gel, they pose a choking risk to young children. So while they remain a popular snack abroad, and cognac is still used in other ways, like a zero-calorie noodle substitute, the colorful snacks have been prohibited by the U.S. since 2002. You might be shocked to know this next item could be illegal. You probably had it this week. Number 18, Unpasteurized Milk. Milk definitely isn't illegal in the United States. Countless quarts are sold each week, but almost all the milk sold in the country, and definitely all the milk at your local supermarket, has been pasteurized before sale in order to kill bacteria and render it more shelf-stable and safer for consumption. But some aficionados insist that pasteurized milk loses both the true taste and many of the nutrients of milk. Whether that's true or not, unpasteurized milk is 150 times more likely to cause illness than the pasteurized kind, according to the FDA. That's why it's banned in 21 states, and most of the other 29 strictly regulated. This next one used to be a common ingredient, but with a surprising kick. Number 17, Sassafras Oil. If you've heard of sassafras, it's probably as an old-timey candy flavor that your grandfather gave you. It used to be much more common, but it's mostly known today as the key flavor in old-school root beer. Many root beers are flavored artificially today, and there's a reason for that. Sassafras oil is double trouble. Not only has it been linked to an increased risk of cancer and kidney and liver damage, but it can be used to make psychoactive drugs. This is all due to a compound named saffrol. And while it's been banned since the 1960s, extracts from the bark of the sassafras plant can still be sold if they're free of the dangerous compound. This next food might be banned in America, but it's iconic in Jamaica. Number 16, ackee. The national fruit of Jamaica, ackee, has been described as being a nutty fruit with the texture of scrambled eggs. That's made it a common component in the breakfast dish ackee and saltfish. But while it's a staple in the island nation, it poses a danger if not handled correctly. When the fruit is unripe, it's loaded with hypoglycin A, a toxin that can cause hypoglycemia and dehydration by impeding the body's ability to lower blood sugar. The raw fruit has been banned since 1973 by the FDA, but not all hope is lost for fans of the Jamaican treat. Canned and frozen fruits are available, although carefully regulated. But none of these foods can easily kill you. That's not true for this next one. Number 15, Fugu. No, this fish isn't banned because it can puff up and stick you with its spines. It's considered a delicacy in the sushi world, but only the masters of the sushi knife dare to serve it. That's because, as immortalized on an early episode of The Simpsons, hidden in the skin and in some of the organs is an incredibly deadly toxin named tetrodotoxin. This neurotoxin can cause paralysis and can kill people who eat enough, and one wrong knife cut could contaminate the whole fish. For most people, that's enough to steer away, but many thrill-seeking gourmets are willing to take the risk, but the government isn't. Sale and consumption of fugu is banned in the United States, except for a few select chefs who are properly trained. But some regulations aren't here to protect us, they're here to protect the animals. Number 14, horse meat. While horses aren't endangered, they're viewed as beloved companions by much of the country, and eating them just seems rude. It's not illegal to eat horse meat, but it's not going to be easy. Slaughtering horses using slaughterhouses is illegal, as is importing the meat or selling it. While the meat is a common delicacy in other countries around the world, the U.S. ban was just renewed in 2018, no doubt pleasing horse lovers around the country, even if they may swear otherwise after their horse comes in last at the Derby. But that doesn't take much for a species to become endangered, as this next fish found out. Number 13. Wild redfish. The redfish, or red drum, was a common game fish in the American South and was generally considered a good fish to eat, but it wasn't the most in demand, until one chef changed that. Paul Proudhome, a celebrity chef considered a legend of Cajun and Creole food, made a dish of blackened redfish that made this humble catch the hottest fish in town, and that meant fishing. Lots and lots of fishing, which quickly led to the population drastically decreasing. Since 2007, it's been a protected game fish, which prohibits the sale of any caught in federal waters. Fishing for the redfish is now banned in all states but Mississippi, although some farmed fish are available. And it's worked. The population is quickly recovering. Not many people can afford this next treat, but that didn't stop it from becoming endangered. Number 12. Beluga caviar. Caviar, the salty eggs of the sturgeon, is one of the most expensive delicacies in the food world, and a few were more prized than the caviar from the beluga sturgeon. Found in the Caspian and Black Seas, this fish's eggs are prized for their subtle flavor and could command as much as $200 an ounce. This demand was high, and the fish was soon on the verge of extinction. So in 2005, the U.S. joined other countries in banning import of beluga caviar, hoping to help the species recover and repopulate. While a black market still exists, the species have survived to this day, although it remains critically endangered. But it's not the only endangered treat from the sea. Number 11. Queen conch. Most conchs are small, and some are among the most venomous animals in the world, but the queen conch, native to the Caribbean Sea, is one of the largest sea snails and has a meaty body that makes it a seafood delicacy. Its size makes it easier to catch, and that has made it an endangered species. While it remains a popular meal in Turks and Caicos, the United States has tried to reduce demand by banning its harvest in federal U.S. waters. But determined seafood fans can always head to the Caribbean. This next sea creature is a beloved resident of the ocean, but also on the menu. Number 10. Sea turtles. Most kids probably associate them with the wise old sea turtle Crush from Finding Nemo. But these reptiles are considered a delicacy in many parts of the world. That's led many species, including the leatherback and hawksbill turtles, to become endangered. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates that in California alone, 35,000 turtles are caught and eaten each year. While individual turtle species are protected and illegal to catch and sell, turtle meat as a whole isn't. In fact, you might be able to find turtle soup made from land or freshwater turtles on sale at a local supermarket. It might surprise you to learn we eat these next creatures more than vice versa. Number 9. Shark fin soup. Oh no, a shark! Stay out of the water! While most of us have seen movies involving
Priceline works with top hotels to save you up to 60%.
These are all great.
And when you get a big deal,
killer sharks, we're actually a far bigger threat to them than they are to us. The gelatinous fins on large sharks are considered a delicacy and are used to flavor a popular Chinese soup. Shark finning, which involves cutting the fins off of sharks and throwing them back in the water, is increasingly considered cruel and has led to the shark population decreasing. While the sale of shark fins is only banned in 12 states and the soup is still a popular and expensive offering, the act of shark finning is totally banned in U.S. waters since 2000. The desire to protect sea life took this next delicacy off a lot of menus. Number 8. Chilean Sea Bass. It may be an ugly fish, but all it takes is a little rebranding to make a seafood superstar. Originally called the Patagonian toothfish, this meaty fish was renamed the Chilean Sea Bass to make it more appetizing. And it worked, a little too well. The mass increase of fishing due to demand rapidly depleted the fish in the wild, and so the FDA stepped in. While it's not entirely illegal to catch this fish now, it's strictly regulated and only certified boats are allowed to catch the fish in specific numbers. But no animal welfare ban has been more controversial than the next one. Number 7. Foie Gras. Almost as prized as beluga caviar, this meaty treat is made from the livers of geese that are heavily fattened, giving the liver an extremely rich and creamy taste. The controversy comes in how the fattening is achieved, using a type of force feeding called gavage that involves funnels down the geese's throats. While defenders say the geese lack a gag reflex and it doesn't harm them, animal rights activists say the process is cruelty to animals and points to the reaction of the birds. That's led to California banning the sale of the product. with multiple cities including Chicago and New York City following suit. While a national ban isn't in the works yet, the activists continue to make the case. But some of the next banned foods in the US might shock you. Number 6. Bushmeat. This isn't so much a specific food as a class of foods. It's common among trophy hunters to go to Africa and hunt large animals, including giraffes and lions, usually as part of a legal hunting program supervised by local guides. While these thrill seekers might be able to display their trophies on social media to many jeers from animal lovers back home, they won't be able to bring their catch back home. Meat from African game hunts, named bushmeat by U.S. authorities, is strictly prohibited due to safety concerns, and customs agents will destroy any they find along with any items that might have come into contact with it. Some banned foods in the U.S. can pack a deadly punch in a small package. Number 5. Laetrile. Have you ever eaten an apricot pit? It probably had a slightly nutty, bitter taste that tasted a little like a weird almond. But eating apricot pits is strongly discouraged because they contain a deadly compound, cyanide. This poison can be toxic or even fatal in large amounts, which makes it all the more shocking that some doctors were marketing it as a cancer treatment. Laetrile, also known as vitamin B17, is a controversial supplement processed from apricot pits and was touted by New Age pseudo-medical activists as a cancer cure. Banned in the U.S. since 1980, it's been responsible for poisonings and may have been involved in hastening the death of famous actor Steve McQueen. But food or drink being poisonous hasn't always stopped its fans. Number 4. Absinthe. There are plenty of potent spirits out there, but few deliver the kick that this bright green alcohol can. A green potion should be a giveaway that danger lies ahead, as any fairy tale fans will tell you, but absinthe has a pleasant, if intense, flavor of anise. The danger and, for some, appeal comes from the wormwood used to make it. This wood contains the chemical compound thujone, which can be toxic in large amounts. While the legends of absinthe being a powerful psychoactive spirit that drove people to insanity might have been exaggerated, it was still banned in the U.S. until 2007, when its import was allowed as long as the thujone was below a certain level. But these last 3 entries might just make you lose your appetite. Number 3. Haggis. A meaty pudding, this Scottish classic has shocked many people with its ingredients. It's a sausage made from onion, oatmeal, and suet, and a collection of sheep's organs, including the heart, liver, and lungs, ground up and encased in a sheep's stomach before cooking. While it's one of the most divisive culinary delights out there, most of the ingredients are harmless, with one exception. Sheep's lungs are banned from sale and import in the U.S. because lung meat is considered a potential vector for respiratory disease, but that hasn't eliminated haggis from the United States entirely. It's still sold in a modified version made with ground lamb and often liver and heart, and canned versions are available. But if you ask Scottish expats, it's just not the same. The penultimate entry is a shockingly primal culinary delight from France. Number 2. Ortolan. A tiny songbird no larger than a thumb. This 1-ounce bird became one of the most notorious French luxury meals. The birds would be kept in covered cages, allowed to overfeed on grain so they'd become fat, and then would be drowned in armagnac and roasted. The diner would eat the bird whole, feet first, spit out the bones. But the tastes of the wealthy caused the population to decline, and eventually France and the EU banned the sale and import of this tiny bird. The US soon followed, which means this favorite snack of royalty has mostly faded into history, and the ortolan bunting's population has rebounded. But the number 1 food on this list will shock you because it's the only banned food that might fight back. Number 1. Kasumatsu. Everyone knows a good cheese needs a little funk, unless you're a Kraft Singles loyalist. But Kasumatsu cheese from Sardinia takes this process to the extreme. Nicknamed the rotten cheese, it's a pecorino cheese made from unpasteurized sheep's milk. But it has a secret ingredient, fly larvae. It's deliberately seeded with the larvae, which turn into maggots and begin to eat through the cheese, making it softer and supposedly increasing fermentation. When it's ready, the cheese is served with the live, wriggling maggots still in it, and eaters frequently wear goggles because the bugs will leap out of the cheese at the face of the diner. While it's a beloved tradition in Sardinia, it's not surprising that it's been banned from the US for health reasons. Some food scientists even say it's possible for the larva to survive digestion and create a parasitic infestation in the intestine. Maybe those Kraft Singles are sounding better after all. For more shocking food secrets, check out Can You Believe the Military Eats This Stuff? Military Food. Or watch American Food the Rest of the World Finds Weird for the other side of the story.
So Bespoke Post, they just send you a cool box every month.
Wow, this is kind of awesome.
And this thing is jam-packed. Look at this thing.
It's got belt straps on the top, which
When one thinks of atrocities committed during the Second World War, the two most obvious culprits that immediately come to mind are Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. However, the Allied powers, including the United States, were just as culpable in violating international laws that they held their defeated foes in account to after the war. Though the Allies did not commit the atrocities on nearly the scale that the Axis powers did, they nonetheless committed actions that, if committed during any other conflict, would have severely tarnished the reputation of the fighting forces and surely brought about criminal charges. The main reason why so many of these crimes took decades to come to light is that even though in the few instances there were investigations, these were typically dropped or hidden away. This was done so as to not tarnish the reputation of the United States as they attempted to rebuild relations with their former foes. After all, if the international community had concrete and complete investigations of many of these incidents, it probably would have hurt the rebuilding process and made Americans look like hypocrites in the midst of high-profile war crime trials in Germany and Japan. But now that there's been almost 80 years for the wounds of World War II to heal, local communities in Germany and Japan have been taking a more critical eye of the picture-perfect image cast in the history books as Americans being the sinless liberators. Here are 3 examples of cases that often took 40 or more years to come to the public attention. Number 1, the Millennium Massacre. The Battle of the Bulge was the costliest battle the U.S. Army ever endured, and almost won Hitler a war-altering victory if it were not for the weather, bad luck, and tenacious defense of U.S. troops. During the opening days of the invasion, U.S. troops were taken aback and quickly fell back in the face of the German onslaught. However, after the first few days, U.S. defenses started to stiffen and inflicted incredibly high casualties on the advancing Germans. As a result of high casualties and seeing their last hope for a military victory dashed, German commanders were furious and wanted revenge. As a result, there were multiple massacres of captured American troops during the Battle of the Bulge, but the most famous was the Malmady Massacre. The Malmady Massacre occurred on December 17, 1944, and was the brutal execution of 84 defenseless American prisoners of war in a field. When U.S. troops recaptured the area and found the survivors, word quickly spread, and Americans from Eisenhower on down to the privates were outraged. Though top American officers never issued such orders, lower-ranking officers at the regimental level and below did in fact issue orders that no prisoners would be taken in the counteroffensive. Though the official U.S. Army history of the battle recounts that though some units did in fact issue these orders, it was doubtful that they were ever carried out. However, one unit certainly did, and that unit was the 21st Armored Infantry Battalion of the 11th Armored Division. As part of their efforts to push the Germans out of Belgium, on New Year's Eve 1944, they, along with another unit, were tasked with clearing the village of Chinonia of Germans. However, the attack did not go so well for them. They were beaten back by stubborn German resistance and ferocious German artillery fire. The unit suffered heavy casualties and was forced to dig in to await further reinforcements at daylight. Early the next morning, on January 1st, 1945, the attack resumed. Through sheer will, the Americans overcame the resistance, and that is when the massacre began. Though the Americans were certainly looking to kill members of the Waffen-SS, the Germans in the village were all regular army soldiers of a Panzer Grenadier Division. Nevertheless, these were the first Germans they had taken prisoner since the new order, and several men in the unit elected to execute that order. According to men who witnessed the massacre, groups of 25 to 30 Germans were led away into the snow-covered fields and shot without warning. In total, it was estimated that 80 Germans were executed in this fashion. Once their deeds were done, the unit moved out the next day on its push toward Germany. Number 2, the Dachau executions. Without a doubt, the scenes that greeted anyone who witnessed a recently liberated concentration camp must have been horrible. Decaying corpses, walking skeletons, the burning sensation of ash and fumes in the air, combined with the putrid smell of death, would have made even the most hardened soldier turn white. For troops of the battle-hardened 3rd Battalion of the 157th Infantry Regiment of the 45th Infantry Division, the scene was more than enough to break the discipline forged during many months of brutal combat. On the morning of April 29, 1945, the unit was tasked with capturing the infamous Dachau concentration camp. Though not a death camp, it housed at the time approximately 40,000 half-dead prisoners and had been the final resting place of tens of thousands of people for over the past decade. The men expected fanatical resistance from the several hundred SS guards who would rather die than face inevitable punishment for their crimes in the last week of the war. After fighting through some light resistance, the men of the 3rd Battalion reached the camp by the late morning and were greeted with machine gun fire from some of the towers. After these guns were silenced, it it seemed though the spirit of the German resistance in the camp was broken, and those not killed in the assault were eager to escape with their lives. However, for some of the guards, they would not do so, even after they surrendered. There are many different versions of the events that took place after the Germans had surrendered, which is probably due to the chaos and limited individual culpability. What is known as the most famous event of the massacre were the events surrounding the infamous coal yard picture. In this picture, a young American machine gunner was photographed shortly after shooting about 16 SS guards while they stood along a wall. Several of their comrades that survived the initial volley can be seen with their arms still raised in surrender. It was this photograph that helped expose the greater portion of the events that unfolded that day. The still unknown soldier is one of many who shot captured SS troopers that day. According to eyewitness testimony, one soldier shot 4 SS men as they cowered inside of a train car and then stepped into the car to give each man a finishing shot to the head to make sure they were dead. Another man allegedly shot several Germans as they came out of a guard tower with their hands raised in surrender. Still, what was more shocking were the reprisals brought by the former inmates on their captors under the watchful eye of American soldiers. Seeking their revenge, camp survivors allegedly murdered dozens more SS guards by beating them to death with shovels and stomping them to death. The American troops understandably did not intervene, since they undoubtedly could not even imagine the horrors these survivors had gone through. Once news got out of the massacre, General Patton, who had become military governor of Bavaria, where the camp was located by this point, ordered an investigation. This investigation, which was not released publicly until 1991, detailed the flagrant violations of international law at the hands of U.S. troops. However, he decided not to press charges, as he did not see this as being helpful to the U.S. cause. Even today, it is safe to say that though the killings themselves were illegal, they got a much better death than what their victims did. Number 3. No prisoner policy, April 1945. Not only did the Waffen-SS face indiscriminate execution in the final days of World War II, but so did the regular German army. After U.S. forces crossed the Rhine River in March of 1945, it was common that many units issued their own take-no-prisoner orders, as had been common in the aftermath of the Malmady Massacre in 1944. However, the reason why many of these units issued such orders, or at the very least tolerated this kind of behavior, was due to multiple factors. The first one was the confirmed reports of concentration and death camp survivor testimony. These reports had slowly started to filter into the mainstream media, especially as the Red Army made its advances into Poland and eastern Germany, where many of these camps were located. U.S. troops who had either seen the first-hand evidence or witnessed the footage were incensed at the atrocities and vowed to punish those responsible. Another contributing factor to the take-no-prisoner attitude in March and April of 1945 was the fact that, in the American point of view, the war was over, and those still fighting were the most guilty of war crimes who were seeking to avoid punishment. Therefore, if they encountered any sort of resistance, especially in the face of their inevitable defeat, it was assumed that those resisting must be SS or guilty of some sort of crime who would rather just die in battle than face justice. Though many SS troopers and similar guilty parties did just that, there were in fact large numbers of regular German troops in the field who did resist only because of the lies fed to them by their government. It was this tenacious resistance in the waning weeks of World War II in Europe that would be their downfall. Atrocities committed by individuals were commonplace. Famed historian Stephen Ambrose claimed of the 1,000 veterans he interviewed, 1/3 said they saw executions take place. These countless murders were embodied in large-scale shootings in places like Jungholzhausen and Treseberg. During the battle for Jungholzhausen on April 15, 1945, the men of the 254th Infantry.
We're giving away our $79 backpack for free. You just pay the shipping. No hidden charges.
Infantry regiment suffered heavy casualties. Though this was a combined action by the regular German army and the Waffen-SS, the army soldiers were eager to surrender, as reported by the local townspeople. However, it seems as though because of heavy casualties inflicted by the SS, the surrendering soldiers were treated just the same. In one of the most notable instances of the massacre, 13 German soldiers who had dug a trench behind a barn surrendered as soon as they saw the Americans. However, when the farmer's son went to check on them the morning after the battle, he found all 13 men were killed with a shot to the back of their neck while on their knees. Yet another villager witnessed an American soldier gun down 4 captured SS men when he told them to run away from him. Several other witnesses came forward that they were ordered to dig a mass grave for victims, which numbered around 30. In the town of Treseberg on April 19, 1945, a similar yet sadder story unfolded. Members of the 18th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division took very heavy casualties in the battle to take Treseberg, with around 60 Americans confirmed being killed, including a battalion commander, who the Americans claimed was shot by a sniper wearing civilian close. As a result, the Americans were incensed and wanted to take revenge. They found their opportunity when they stumbled upon a group of 10 Hitler youth sent to the area. According to local historians, these young boys, all around the age of 14, had just graduated infantry training at a nearby camp and were ordered to the front line. As they were making their way forward, they were surprised and captured by the Americans on the road. One of the boys managed to run away and hid, thus providing testimony for the villagers to reclaim the bodies of the boys after the American troops shot them. Soon after, the villagers had the boys buried with several German soldiers killed in action, and in 1951 had them exhumed to prove their murder, with the medical examiner confirming each boy had been shot in the back of the neck. These 3 crimes are just a highlight of the violations of international law committed by the U.S. forces during World War II. Unfortunately, the U.S. military was not very interested in investigating and much less prosecuting war crimes either during or after the war. In fact, most of the records and testimony actually come from sources outside the U.S., like the German Army War Crimes Bureau, that investigated reports of crimes against Germans by the Allies. Unfortunately, there are undoubtedly untold stories of more crimes committed by U.S. forces that may never see the light of day, but hopefully further scholarship in this area will set the record straight that not all Americans who served in World War II did so with honor.
A century ago, Canadian troops were known to enjoy a pint at the Rifleman Pub in Epsom, England. Just what they were doing June 17, 1919, when a fight broke out and 2 soldiers were arrested.
Very large Canadian convalescent camp.
100 years later, that fateful night is being revisited on this tour, retracing the steps of those Canadians who were taken on foot to the nearby police station.
They now have 2 Canadians under arrest,
much to the anger of their comrades. The First World War had been over for months, with Canadians unable to leave just yet. Still waiting to be sent back home, some were left to heal their wounds at the nearby camp. Others spent their days in town, charming Epsom's women.
As I say, there's tension between the local men and the Canadians because of all this business of them pitching their wives and girlfriends. In fact, there were 78 women who actually left married Canadians.
Local police became unwitting targets when tensions came to a head that night in June. 400 Canadian soldiers stormed the police station, which stood at this spot 100 years ago. They busted windows. They tried to set the building on fire, all in an attempt to free their comrades. Several police officers were injured, and that plaque marks the spot where Sergeant Thomas Green was killed. Crowds lined the streets for Green's funeral procession. Headlines back home told Canadians of the violence, with 4 of their countrymen sent to jail only briefly for rioting, including Cape Breton-born Private Alan McMaster, who wielded the iron bar that killed the officer. In hindsight now, experts blame post-traumatic stress disorder for that fit of rage.
When he was faced that night, Alan McMaster was faced that night with the fight in the darkness, where was he? Was he in a street in Epsom, or was he back in the trenches?
Years later, McMaster confessed to killing Green, but no one was ever convicted. McMaster said he'd been pardoned by Edward, Prince of Wales, who just happened to have a visit to Canada planned for 2 months later.
They couldn't even contemplate the thought of him touring those places if some Canadian soldiers were possibly going to be hung or sentenced to life in prison.
Green's family held no ill will toward Canada. In fact, his 2 daughters married Canadians, and this week his descendants traveled to Epsom to remember the slain policeman.
He would be in awe just to see that his family continued and remembered his service, that it's not forgotten.
A story seldom told in Canada, still resonating here. They're even serving special Sergeant Green bitter beer at the Rifleman Pub, where the story began 100 years ago.
Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Epsom, England.
Want to pursue higher ed on a budget? No problem. Sophia's monthly subscription can allow you to not...
The U.S. military has a storied history, and to start as one of the weakest militaries in the world. Nothing more than groups of farmers fighting for the right to dictate their own fate. The U.S. military was largely a backwater force that couldn't hope to stand against the world's superpowers. It was only fate and thousands of miles of ocean that ensured American independence. The distance too large for Europe to send more than a token force to put America in its place from time to time. After the Civil War, however, the U.S. began to feel the military large enough to at last challenge the world's great powers. And after proving its worth in 2 world wars, the U.S. at last rose to the status of superpower alongside the Soviet Union. Today, the U.S. stands as the lone superpower. And while others may challenge its current status, nobody can challenge the American military and win. And these weapons are the reasons why. B-52 bomber. There's few things America's enemies fear more than the B-52 bomber, known as the flying warehouse for the incredible quantity of bombs it can carry, or more affectionately as the Buff or Big Ugly Effer. The B-52 is almost 70 years old today, and still flying strong for the U.S. military. Originally designed in the years after World War II and first flying in 1952, the B-52 is the longest-serving aircraft in the U.S. military and the Air Force, which operates a fleet of 58 active B-52s with 18 in reserve and 12 more in long-term storage ready to respond to a global emergency. Don't let its age fool you, though. The B-52 is still highly relevant even in today's information-age combat environment. 8 turbofan engines power this massive beast, with a multi-billion-dollar overhaul scheduled to replace the current engines with 20% more fuel-efficient engines. This will significantly improve the aircraft's incredible range of over 10,000 miles and combat radius of 4,480 miles. Its huge bomb bays and plentiful wing pylon stations allow the plane to fly with 70,000 pounds of bombs, cruise missiles, and mines. Compare that with approximately 8,000 pounds that World War II bombers used to carry, and each B-52 can carry as much firepower as a squadron of World War II bombers. Just lugging that much firepower is impressive enough, but what makes the B-52 so lethal is the sheer variety of ordnance that it can carry and how far. The B-52 can be equipped with sea mines, which can be air-launched and deny entire stretches of the ocean to enemy ships. In 2018, a B-52 demonstrated to America's enemies the capability to deploy an entire minefield from 50 miles away using quick-strike ER sea mines. This was a clear show of force and a deterrent to the Chinese military, which has long threatened to invade Taiwan and reunite it with the mainland by force. With its ability to carry air-launched cruise missiles, the B-52's effective range is increased by hundreds of miles and keeps the big plane well out of the range of most air defense systems. During strikes in Syria, B-52s were able to effectively service targets without ever entering Syrian airspace. With each cruise missile carrying 1,000 pounds of explosives, a B-52 could threaten large swaths of territory from a distance. In the nuclear mission, a B-52 can carry up to 20 air-launched nuclear-tipped cruise missiles, giving a single plane the ability to wipe out 20 cities from the face of the Earth. If this doesn't make the B-52 a weapon to fear, then we simply don't know what does. Our next aircraft, though, is the one bomber in the U.S. fleet that keeps hostile world leaders awake at night, knowing they could be its victim at any moment. B-2 Spirit Bomber. There's no single more iconic shape in the world than that of the American B-2 bomber. Its revolutionary flying wing design is so advanced that it wasn't even feasible until Northrop Grumman, its creator, developed specialized flight computers to help the pilot keep the airplane stable in flight. With no vertical features whatsoever, the B-2 is a miracle of engineering and one of the stealthiest aircraft in the world. At its conception, the B-2 had one single mission: penetrate into the heart of the Soviet Union and deliver nuclear payloads to the most well-defended targets. Using ICBMs would also get that job done, but the B-2 sent a very clear message to the Soviets: we can hit you anytime, anywhere, with any weapon of our choosing, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Today, the B-2 is still nuclear capable, but it's primarily used for high-risk conventional bombing. Despite advancements in radar and sensing technology, the B-2's flying wing design and advanced radar-absorbent materials still make it stealthy enough to penetrate any air defense network in the world. With the ability to bring 20 tons of weapons to bear on any target anywhere, no other aircraft in the world gives hostile world leaders the nighttime Hershey squirts quite like the B-2. All that capability comes at a steep cost, though, with each plane having a whopping $1 billion price tag. Factor in additional costs to get a B-2 ready for modern information age war, and you're looking at a plane with a price tag of $2.1 billion. That's what made the tragic loss of a B-2 bomber in 2008 all the more financially devastating to the U.S. military. These aircraft are so sophisticated that when one was severely damaged in a fire in 2010, it took a whopping 3 years before it was combat capable again. Any U.S. Air Force official will tell you, however, that the B-2 is well worth the cost and difficulty in maintenance. It is the single most survivable air platform in the world, able to penetrate and survive in any airspace, and return the next day to do the job all over again. Amphibious combat vehicle. In any future conflict, odds are that amphibious landings are going to be a requirement for major American military operations. Whether they're in response to a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and U.S. Marines are on their way to liberate the island nation, or to neutralize Iranian coastal facilities in a future conflict, amphibious landings are going to be how the U.S. kicks the door open for follow-on forces. The mightiest tanks and best-equipped soldiers in the world, after all, are useless if they can't get in country in the first place. Enter the U.S. Marine Corps Amphibious Combat Vehicle, a replacement of the 40-year-old amphibious assault vehicle. More has changed than just one word. Modern amphibious landings are going to be the most dangerous ever undertaken by any military power, thanks to the proliferation of smart weapons, modern anti-tank weapons, and all matter of mines. The amphibious combat vehicle will offer up to 3 times the survivability of its predecessor, and with a range of 370 miles, will be able to push deep into enemy territory before requiring refueling. For defense, the ACV will come equipped with a variety of weapons, including up to a 30mm cannon, anti-tank missiles, 50 caliber, and 7.62mm machine guns. A suite of cameras will give their drivers 360-degree awareness, and thick armor plating makes the ACV as resistant to mines and IEDs as the MRAP currently in use in Afghanistan and Iraq. Perhaps nothing the vehicle is equipped with, however, is more deadly than the 13 fully equipped Marines that a single ACV will be able to deliver amphibiously from ship to shore on any beach in the world. Our next weapon is as powerful as some nations' entire militaries combined. Ford-class aircraft carrier. With a displacement of over 100,000 tons, the Ford-class aircraft carrier is the largest warship to ever cruise the world's oceans. She's also the deadliest by far, fully capable of taking on entire enemy fleets all by her lonesome. This one American ship can fight entire nations to a standstill, and the fact that the U.S. is planning on arming itself with 10 of them over the next 2 decades should make America's enemies tremble in fear. These are not just the deadliest ships of war ever built, they're also some of the most advanced. Automation technology has slashed the number of personnel required to man each, down to 2,600 from around 6,000 on a typical Nimitz carrier. Its advanced electromagnetic launch system reduces maintenance required on each airplane, meaning more aircraft are available to fly more missions. 2 next-generation nuclear reactors not only provide more than enough power for the entire ship, but are designed to be fully capable of powering future additions to the carrier, such as a
Destroy type 2 diabetes with our 6-second method, or you don't pay for it. Top doctor from Arizona has discovered the real root cause of high blood sugar, and it has nothing to do with eating carbs or sugar, or even genetics, but instead with beta cells inside the pancreas. While most medications can keep the symptoms of diabetes at bay, they don't actually treat the root cause of the problem. So before you resign yourself to being hooked on medication for life, you've got to see this now. This well-known doctor from Arizona was forced out of his practice after he unveiled a billion-dollar secret he wasn't supposed to know. A clinically proven, simple 6-second trick you can use starting today to potentially eliminate type 2 diabetes, regardless of your age or medical condition. and it works like crazy. More than 43,000 people are already doing it, and they have been able to treat their type 2 diabetes successfully, while also losing pound after pound of diabetic fat. Remember, this has nothing to do with meds, fad diets, exercise, or expensive treatments. Well, stop everything you're doing and click the link below to watch a short, free special video this doctor created. The $390 billion diabetes industry doesn't want you to see this video and discover the extraordinary diabetes fighting secret. Watch it now before it's too late.
Platform in the world, able to penetrate and survive in any airspace, and return the next day to do the job all over again. Amphibious combat vehicle. In any future conflict, odds are that amphibious landings are going to be a requirement for major American military operations. Whether they're in response to a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and U.S. Marines or the mightiest tanks of the 40-year-old amphibious assault vehicle, more has changed than just one word. Modern amphibious landings are going to be the most dangerous ever survivability of its predecessor, and with a range of 370 miles, will be anti-tank missiles, 50 caliber and 7.62mm machine guns. A suite of cameras will give their drivers 360-degree awareness, and thick armor plating makes the ACV as resistant to mines and IEDs as the MRAP currently in use in Afghanistan and Iraq. Perhaps nothing the vehicle is equipped with, however, is more deadly than the 13 fully equipped Marines that a single ACV will be able to deliver amphibiously from ship to shore on any beach in the world. Our next weapon is as powerful as some nations' entire militaries combined. Ford-class aircraft carrier. With a displacement of over 100,000 tons, the Ford-class aircraft carrier is the largest warship to ever cruise the world's oceans. She's also the deadliest by far, fully capable of taking on entire enemy fleets all by her lonesome. This one American ship can fight entire nations to a standstill, and the fact that the U.S. is planning on arming itself with 10 of them over the next 2 decades should make America's enemies tremble in fear. These are not just the deadliest ships of war ever built, they're also some of the most advanced. Automation technology has slashed the number of personnel required to man each, down to 2,600 from around 6,000 on a typical Nimitz carrier. Its advanced electromagnetic launch system reduces maintenance required on each airplane, meaning more aircraft are available to fly more missions. 2 next-generation nuclear reactors not only provide more than enough power for the entire ship, but are designed to be fully capable of powering future additions to the carrier, such as
insulin injections can make diabetes complicated. Meet Omnipod. It delivers insulin without daily injections. Just one small pod replaces up to 14 injections. It's
electromagnetic railguns and high-energy lasers. The Ford is a carrier built with the future in mind. To protect itself, each Ford is equipped with advanced RAM 162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, capable of taking on both incoming enemy fighters and anti-ship missiles. Dual rolling airframe missiles provide point defense against incoming missiles, and their heat-seeking warheads are capable of tracking even hypersonic weapons that regular radar-guided missiles have difficulty tracking. As a last measure, 3 Phalanx Sea Whiz gun emplacements are capable of spitting out tungsten rounds at a rate of thousands per minute to shred any missiles that penetrated the fleet's air defenses. More than anything, though, a Ford's sheer size makes it extremely difficult to kill, and the big ship is capable of taking at least half a dozen anti-ship missile strikes before going down. The Ford's air wing, however, is what makes it the most feared ship in the world. With the ability to field up to 90 aircraft, each Ford can put into the air power comparable to most nations' entire air forces. This will very soon include the 5th generation F-35, whose stealth, advanced sensors, and ability to network across an entire surface and air fleet makes it itself one of the deadliest aircraft in the world. However, the Ford packs more than just the world's best fighter aircraft. Its complement of anti-submarine warfare helicopters will allow it to keep local seas safe for surface vessels by tracking, identifying, and ultimately destroying enemy submarines. Its electronic attack squadron will help keep friendly aircraft and even surface ships safe from enemy sensors by confusing or degrading enemy capabilities. And its early warning E-2C Hawkeyes will give the aircraft carrier an effective situational awareness range of several hundred miles, making it impossible for an enemy to sneak up on one via the ocean or the air. With so much firepower in one area, some have shown serious concern that aircraft carriers are increasingly vulnerable to advanced hypersonic and ballistic missiles, both of which can be fired from very far outside the carrier's combat air patrol range. However, U.S. officials remain confident that Ford-class carriers can not just meet but survive these threats, and a new hypersonic missile defense program is already in the works to defeat these lethal threats. Due to the critical need to keep these high-value assets safe from enemy attack, however, U.S. officials are completely tight-lipped about how exactly they plan on defeating these threats, and these programs remain highly classified to this day. These are just some of the weapons that America's enemies fear the most, but with the world's largest defense budget, there are plenty more in the American arsenal, including secret capabilities that an enemy won't learn about until it's far too late for them. Now, go watch Top 10 Most Powerful Militaries to keep the watch party going, or check out this other video instead.
Okay, today is June 1st. Please say your name and spell it.
I'm God, G-O-D.
I'm doing this interview and it's getting kind of weird.
In what was once a quiet hamlet in rural England, the dead are being carted through the muddy streets. Inside one particular dwelling, a man lies on his back, delirious from the effects of a very high fever. He struggles to breathe. Sounds emanate from him that can only be described as a death rattle. Suddenly, he vomits blood on the floor, the motion exposing what looks like egg-sized buboes covering his body. He will be dead within a day or two, as will his wife and his 3 children, as will his best friend and neighbors, as will most of the people in the surrounding areas. What we're talking about is the Black Death, a disease so virulent and deadly, to some it looked like the world would end. Black Death. You can easily imagine why folks in parts of rural England in the 1300s must have thought that this killer pestilence was the end of the world. Around 90% of people back then lived in small rural communities, and the Black Death in some cases wiped out the entire community. As one chronicler put it, parts of the countryside were quite void of inhabitants, so that there were almost none left alive. Can you imagine what that must have been like? No one knew what was coming. The Black Death, actually not called the Black Death back then, was a bubonic plague that entered England from the south and made its way through the country at a frightening speed. It wasn't as if these rural communities had much warning. Word didn't travel too fast back in 1348. Some of those small villages, perhaps with populations of up to 500, were completely depopulated. In the larger towns, and certainly London, some people had been hearing rumors about a terrifying pestilence that had been sweeping through Europe, but the rural folks didn't know what was coming. This is how another chronicler put it when talking about one particular place. Almost the whole strength of the town perished. In other towns, there weren't enough people living to bury the dead. The plague then traveled further north, with one bishop writing at the time that he saw no one from one town because they were all dead. It traveled to Scotland too, a country at the time that had been warring with England. Scottish soldiers had said the disease was God taking vengeance on the evil English, but those soldiers carried it home to Scotland. The plague was an equal opportunist, and it killed the Scottish with a similar ferocity. One Scottish chronicler later wrote in 1348, "So great a plague has never been heard of from the beginning of the world to the present day, or been recorded in books." Estimates vary, but it's thought that in England alone, the Black Death killed 40 to 60% of the population. It killed something like 30 to 60% of Europe's population. And so you can imagine that at the time, people must have wondered if this was not the end of the world. Plagues in general. We're not going to go through every plague that must have made people wonder if humans didn't have long left, but we'll mention a couple. You have the Plague of Athens that lasted from 430 to 426 BC. No one is exactly sure what the disease was, but it killed over a quarter of the population of Athens, and it killed those it affected very quickly. That was, some ways, good news, because the hosts died so fast they couldn't spread it around too much. Then there was the Plague of Justinian, which lasted from 541 to 750. This was certainly a bubonic plague, which relates to those swollen lymph nodes we talked about that looked like tumors. The name for this kind of swollen lymph node was a bubo, hence bubonic plague. During the time it ravaged Europe, it took with it half of the population there. People might well have thought, this thing will never stop. It will kill us all. The Great Plague of London, that lasted from 1665 to 1666, killed around 100,000 people, but that was actually around 20% of the people that lived there. While Londoners back then might not have thought the world was going to end, they would have certainly wondered just how bad things could get. Cuban Missile Crisis. During the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and the USA were creating stockpiles of nuclear weapons, there was always an overhanging fear that someone might just press the button and an all-out nuclear war would take place, with it possibly ending humanity. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, people were always a little concerned that nuclear war could happen, mainly because the TV kept showing them infomercials about what to do in the event of such a war. Those programs were damn scary too, if not a bit ridiculous at times. We're not sure if the duck and cover technique would have saved someone from a nuclear bomb, but the ad certainly put the fear of God into people. It was in the 60s when things really came to a head. By the way, there have been a bunch of what are called close calls, but this was the closest. From October 16th to October 28th in the year 1962, there was a standoff between the Soviets and the Americans. It's a long story, but let's just say that the USA had prior to 62 watched as Fidel Castro's revolutionary army turned over a Cuban dictatorship and introduced a revolutionary socialist state. Well, that really upset the Americans, who certainly didn't want Cuba getting into bed with Soviet communists. And that happened anyway, much to the chagrin of the U.S. In 1961, the Americans secretly directed an invasion of Cuba led by Cuban rebels, and this became known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. It didn't work, is the short explanation. After the invasion, Castro got in touch with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. Together, they agreed to construct ballistic missile launch facilities in Cuba, sites that weren't that far from the USA. The U.S. already had launch sites in Europe that weren't that far from Russia. When the U.S. found out about the Cuban facilities, you could say the White House and the Pentagon weren't exactly happy about it. The U.S. demanded that the facilities be taken down and the missiles be sent back to Russia. Knowing that the Americans had launch sites in Europe, Khrushchev said he wanted to level the playing field. And so if the U.S. decided to attack them, what would now happen was mutually assured destruction. The very apt abbreviation and acronym of that is MAD, or MAD. What you might not know is that the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Department of Defense wanted to just go ahead with a full-scale attack on Cuba, thinking the Soviets wouldn't fight back. The missile sites soon became known to the public, and the people started getting scared. If you were around in those times, you would have seen President John F. Kennedy on the TV speaking to the nation, and his words were, "It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union." Damn, people might have thought, are they really going to do this? Things heated up more, and then a Soviet spy said it seemed war was imminent and asked U.S. officials if some kind of agreement could be made, rather than a nuclear war kill many, many people. Meanwhile, the U.S. military's top brass were still pushing for an all-out attack on Cuba. Khrushchev wrote to Kennedy discussing how they made a tight knot of tension and it needed to be untightened. He wrote, "If there is no intention to tighten the knot and thereby doom the world to the catastrophe of the thermonuclear war, then let us not only relax the forces pulling on the ends of the rope, let us take measures to untie that knot. We're ready for this." There's much more to the story, but in the end, Kennedy agreed to remove the missile launch sites from Italy and Turkey and not invade Cuba, only if the Soviets dismantled their launch sites in Cuba. Diplomacy won in the end, but we weren't so far from nuclear war. How would that have gone down? Some years later, an American political scientist wrote the U.S. airstrike and invasion that were scheduled for the third week of the confrontation would likely have triggered a nuclear response against American ships and troops, and perhaps even Miami. The resulting war might have led to the deaths of over 100 million Americans and over 100 million Russians. Maybe that's not the end of the world, but what would have happened after that? December 21st, 2012. And now for something completely different, and even a bit silly. We say silly, but the polls at this time reveal that 10% of the people interviewed thought the world would end on this day. And you might ask, what was so special about December 21st, 2012? Why not June 6, 2007 at 4:26 p.m., starting with an exploding sausage factory somewhere outside Lyon in France? That made about as much sense. This was what you might call a doomsday scenario.
We're giving away our $79 backpack for free. You just pay the shipping. No hidden charges, no...
Involved a large number of very misguided and misinformed people who thought the end of civilization was imminent. It was going to end that day because they said this was the day that the Mayan calendar ended. It had run out of spaces, so to speak, and they said there wasn't another edition. This was complete balderdash, to use a word we think people should use much more frequently because it sounds so cool. The calendar didn't end at all, and any expert on Mayan culture could have told those 10%ers that, but they weren't listening. They were prepping instead and busy writing horrible things about so-called Mayan apocalypse deniers. Some people around the world actually had one last big party on December 20th. Strangers let their hair down and made love in the streets. Some sat quietly at home burning incense sticks while listening to One Direction's Take Me Home. Others were less accepting of death, and photos emerged online of them down in their bunkers with all the food they'd hoarded, only for the sun to come up the next day and leave them wondering what they were going to do with 300 boxes of mac and cheese. Weirdly, people in the city of Merida, Mexico, the place where you'd have found lots of Mayans, were just going about their business as usual. It turned out that one loon had misread some Mayan text and another loon shared that loon's prophecy, and the rest was history. We found out then that in the age of the internet and social media, a person can read an alleged holy inscription on a Dorito, and soon they'll have a maddening crowd of followers. The followers of this theory didn't bother reading the words of one of the world's leading Mayan and Mesoamerican specialists, a man who said, "No Maya text, ancient, colonial, or modern, ever predicted the end of time or the end of the world." Y2K. At the stroke of midnight, when the year was January 1st, 2000, some people were hunkering down waiting for the apocalypse to happen. This time, it wasn't about ancient theories, but modern technology. The theory was that something called the Millennium Bug would wreak havoc on our highly digitized world. There actually was a slight problem, and that coders in the early days would not write something like 1997, they just put 97, because that saved space. But what would happen when 2000 came along? Would 00 actually mean 1900? Or would this bug shut down and mess up certain computer systems? Some people thought it would. What had to be done was a lot of coding to fix the problem, but for some reason, people thought computer systems all over the world would just freak out. They saw a doomsday scenario with nuclear power plants the world over exploding, missiles going off, banking systems breaking down, etc., etc. It would take us back to the Dark Ages or something like that. One woman in the U.S. saw this happening and started hoarding early. She told the press, "If something happens and I didn't prepare my family, I just couldn't live with myself." She even kept her hoarding of goods secret from her friends and neighbors, believing that when the lights went out, the unprepared would hit the streets in mobs and take what they wanted. There were some hitches in some systems, but all in all, the day after 2000 was just like any other day, other than the fact that a lot of people had huge hangovers. Next year. Okay, so we'll finish this with a prediction for 2021. That is the predication of an American pastor of the Mariners Church. He's got the rapture checked on his Google Calendar for some time in 2021, and it's kind of like the Leftovers show where a bunch of people just go missing. In this case, it'll be the Christian believers who get hoovered up to the heavens, and the rest of the non-believers, or people of any other religion we imagine, will have to stay down on Earth and eke out a living amongst floods, plagues, and earthquakes, and the great toilet roll wars. We added that one. Before you start getting worried, remember that the Earth has been experiencing floods, earthquakes, and plagues for a long time, and they're not going to go away. Anyway, we'll just see next year if a bunch of folks disappear into the heavens. Just to let you know how long things have been happening down here on Earth, and to answer a question you all want answered, watch this video. Why do you even exist? And if that's a bit heavy right now,
Toes. Watch your toes there. Sorry. There you go.
it's the middle of the night. You're sound asleep when suddenly your eyes pop open. You're not sure why. You didn't hear a noise, but you feel something. Is it in the air? Your room does feel colder than usual. You look around your room. Nothing. Relief washes over you and you start to close your eyes when there is something there. A shadow in the corner. Something that wasn't there before. You can't quite make it out, but it looks human. It's so dark you can't tell. You pull the blankets up just below your eyes. It must just be a weird shadow, right? Or your brain playing tricks on you. You close your eyes and count to 3. You know when you open them, it'll be gone. 1, 2, 3. It's gone. No, it's on the other corner now, and it's coming towards you. Its eyes open, glowing red in the dark, and staring at you. You're so scared you can't scream. You can barely move. It's getting closer and closer. You reach out, and just in time, you hit the switch on your lamp and see your coat rack. You laugh to yourself. It does look a little like a person in the dark, and maybe the eyes you saw were just the lights reflecting in from the street outside. Do a quiet search just to make sure there's nothing in your room, but you can't shake that feeling that a few minutes ago you weren't alone. It's not going to be easy to fall asleep again, but you assume you're safe. The strange shadow person at the corner of your room begins to fade from your mind, but you can't help but feel like it's not the last you've seen of it. It's a week later when you're on the bus home. It's been a long day and you're very tired, trying to keep awake, but you keep dozing off when then out of the corner of your eye, there it is. On the side of the road, you see the same shadowy figure that was in your room, glowing eyes looking right into yours. The bus is moving fast and you only have a second to glimpse it before it disappears, but your heart is pounding. You try to put it out of your mind, but there it is again on the side of the road. Is it following you? Or is there more than one of these shadowy things chasing you? You don't want to keep looking, afraid of what you'll find, so you close your eyes and you wait for your stop. As you get off, you don't see anything around you, but you're not taking any chances as you run to your home. Who are these shadow people? Or more accurately, what are they? Are you just hallucinating and seeing them when you're tired? Or is something more sinister going on? You're definitely not going to sleep anytime soon. So you turn all the lights on and get on the internet to search. You Google shadow people and start clicking through the results. You're not sure what you're hoping to find, but you learn that you're definitely not alone. Lots of people report seeing these things, which is good since it means you're not losing your mind. And the reports aren't new either. You feel your chest get tight as you see that people have been talking about shadow people for hundreds of years, with these mysterious creatures appearing in countless religions, legends, and belief systems. There's lots of different theories, but whatever they are, people have been scared of them for a very long time. You're starting to feel a little better, actually, knowing that you aren't alone in having seen them. When you click on a website and your heart nearly stops, there, staring back at you, is a picture of the shadow person from your room. So, what are the shadow people? Not many mainstream media outlets have talked about them or the possibility that they are real, usually dismissing them as urban legends. But there's no shortage of information on alternative radio devoted to cryptozoology and the supernatural. The shadow people first broke into the sort of mainstream in 2001 on the conspiracy theory-centered radio show Coast to Coast AM, when Art Bell introduced the concept with Native American elder Harley Swift Deer Reagan. Bell decided to spice up the show by inviting listeners to submit their own shadow people stories, and was stunned when hundreds of people wrote in, sending drawings of the supernatural shadow beings they had supposedly encountered, drawings eerily similar to the being you yourself encountered multiple times. The shadow people gained a new investigator only a few months later, when paranormal investigator Heidi Hollis published her first book on the shadow people. Hollis went further than Bell and Reagan, who normally portrayed the shadow people as neutral entities. Hollis argued that they were hostile alien entities that were stalking us, and claimed they could flicker in and out of peripheral vision, getting close enough to jump on people's chests and choke them. Many people say they feel a strong, hostile energy from these beings and believe them to be angry spirits from beyond the grave, stalking the living, while others think they might be the psychic remnants of inhabitants from another dimension, and that they're either trying to make first contact with us or trying to warn us about something. A theory advanced by the late paranormal writer and researcher Rosemary Ellen Guiley is that there's something else entirely, a supernatural being known as a jinn. These creatures frequently appear in Middle Eastern mythology and are more commonly known as genies. Yes, that kind that grants wishes. But jinns aren't bound to a lamp or a bottle and are filled with magical energy. These shape-shifting beings can take any form they want, and many believe the shadow people are remnants of jinns from ancient times. Whether they're a genie spirit or from another dimension on a spirited journey, the abundance of evidence from shadow people is quite disturbing. The internet is full of stories of people recounting their experiences with shadow people. Paranormal investigator Chad Stombaugh even claims to have captured video footage of shadow people, but the footage is blurry and inconclusive. A still photograph of a basement in the supposedly haunted Gaslight Inn in Indianapolis shows a creeping black mass in an otherwise brightly lit room. The most disturbing story of the shadow people comes from the sleep study GR16, which was supposedly conducted in 1971 at Camden College. A brief clip claiming to be from the study shows a group of people who said they were haunted by shadow people in their dreams. The experiment aimed to track their brain patterns, but according to the story, something went horribly wrong, and the shadow people killed the subjects. But no records of this study exist beyond some unsubstantiated video clips. The more you look into shadow people, the more you're left with questions and no answers. One of the strangest elements of the shadow people is how closely one person's description matches that of another. They're almost all the same, a shadowy, vaguely human-like figure lurking just far enough away from the person that it can't be made out clearly. Many people report glowing red or yellow eyes staring at them. Some of the shadows look more like an amorphous blob, as in the case of the famous phantom at the Gaslight Inn, which resembled a creeping mass slowly expanding over the basement. But many others report a clearer, more disturbing figure, which has come to be known as the Hat Man. This is a distinctly humanoid figure dressed in a black three-piece suit, wearing a black hat. His eyes glow red, and he holds a pocket watch that he occasionally checks, as if he's waiting for something, or someone. He's very tall, at least 6 feet, but he's also been described as being up to 10 feet tall. Many people believe the Hat Man could be linked to the popular urban legend Slender Man, another abnormally tall, sharp-dressed monster with ties to supernatural terror. Most people thankfully only encounter the shadow people for brief moments, seeing them out of the corner of their eye or in the dark corners of rooms, only for them to disappear when the light falls on them. But some people have had longer and far more terrifying experiences that suggest there may be some truth to these encounters. Author Daniel Penchbeck, a paranormal expert, reported that he began seeing other dimensional beings that resembled the shadow people. Penchbeck believes that he was able to see into another dimension, and that somehow these creatures came back with him, haunting him for weeks before they stopped, and he was able to return to his normal life. But not everyone believes that the shadow people are a supernatural entity. Scientists who have analyzed the sightings propose a much more down-to-earth explanation, that these shadow beings are a product of our mind playing tricks on us. The most common times for people to see shadow people are when they're under intense emotion, isolated, or very tired. The mind is experiencing heightened stress at this point, so mundane things like a coat rack or a shadow become a potential threat. Sleep paralysis, which is where the body's motor functions take longer to wake up than the mind, also causes hallucinations that can take the form of shadowy demonic figures and may be the origin of the mysterious figures. Two more factors that might be influencing shadow people's.
So, Bespoke Post, they just send you a cool box every month.
Wow, this is good awesome.
And this thing is jam.
Sightings include sleep deprivation and addiction. Dr. Jack Potts has studied those addicted to substances that keep them in a heightened state of awareness and keep them from falling asleep, and he observed that they became paranoid and conspiratorial. They kept reporting hallucinations of people following them and believed them to be supernatural beings that posed a danger to them. While descriptions of these beings varied, many of them matched up with the descriptions we see over and over for shadow people. Potts believes the shadow people are our body's natural reaction to stress, albeit a terrifying one, rather than a true supernatural phenomenon. But if that was the case, why have so many people, even those who have no substance abuse issues or bouts of sleep paralysis, seemingly spotted them out of nowhere? One thing's for sure, the shadow people have captured the attention of everyone who loves ghost stories and paranormal phenomena. These mysterious creatures have shown up in countless movies and TV shows, with perhaps the most famous appearance being in an episode of the rebooted Twilight Zone in 1985. In the episode titled The Shadow Man, the shadow person lived under the bed of a teenage boy and was a danger to everyone besides him until the twist ending. The 2013 film Shadow People spun out of the legendary GR16 sleep study, dramatizing it with terrifying results. And plenty of popular video games have you encounter the shadow people as enemies, giving gamers a brief taste of these terrifying beings without letting them get too close. We hope. Sightings go back decades, and hundreds of people are giving very similar reports of encounters, just like the ones you experienced. But as you give up on your internet investigation for the evening, what still hasn't been answered for you is whether this is something mundane or truly a supernatural encounter. Was your mind playing tricks on you, or are there actually otherworldly beings stalking you? It's late, and you have an early start tomorrow, so you turn out the lights and get into bed. Your eyes are heavy, and you can feel yourself drifting off to sleep when your eyes fall on the corner of the room again. Is that your coat rack or something else? No, you tell yourself it's just the coat rack. Or is it? Is it a shadow person or just your mind playing tricks on you? You pull the cover over your head and decide it's best not knowing. Well, you think maybe just a peek. You slowly lower the covers and open your eyes. You will yourself to roll over and look at the coat rack in the corner. As you turn your head, you see it. Two glowing red eyes, inches away from your face. Looking for more videos on unexplained phenomena? Check out new video evidence that proves ghosts are real. Or check out horrifying unsolved internet mysteries for more on the darkest secrets of the web. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. It's just after 2 a.m. In fact, he sleeps with move his legs and to get it's in the black. Something from a few decades ago with a wide brim. Then the figure seems to open its eyes, blazing red coals in its pitch black face. David can't breathe. Horrible pressure weighs down on him. He gasps for air, trying to scream once more. Suddenly the spell is broken and David has full control of his body. He throws himself off the bed the opposite side of the Hat Man, scrambling to get away, but as he picks himself up off the floor, the Hat Man is gone. The only evidence anyone was ever there is the still opened bedroom door. Someone will go on to tell him he simply suffered a bout when the paralysis faded, and with prolific might be its most different, but the description, when he appears in a group, it's blazing red eyes. Before finally, some suffered soul. One victim for her and almost suffocating her. Try as she might, she couldn't move her body or scream for help, though, or have described more physical encounters. Still others have. Medical doctors will point to sleep paralysis. Something like 40% experienced the phenomenon and believe it, and described as muscles from their all over the world, around 6 feet to each individual culture. And it's never him who's the attacker, but rather other shadow people that accompany him. These individuals scratches or bruises on their in closets. Some paralysis clearly does not explain these physical events. So what does the Hat Man want? Opinions are divided on the identity of the Hat Man. Some believe he's an alien observer, an otherworldly visitor using advanced technology to cloak himself and manipulate his victims. Most, however, are convinced the Hat Man is purely paranormal, an evil entity that's not of this or any other world. Perhaps he's feeding on his victims' fears, as clearly if he wished to physically hurt or kill his paralyzed victims, he'd be able to freely do so while they were paralyzed. This would put the Hat Man more in line with demonic entities, which are well known to cultivate and feed on fear, becoming more powerful the more their victim is afraid of them. Whatever a Hat Man's interactions are, one thing's for sure, he isn't done, as he continues to be reported around the world. The next Hat Man visit might just be in your bed. You saved all year to take the vacation of a lifetime on a cruise ship. After you set sail and the fun begins, the band starts playing, and soon you'll be gorging on seemingly never-ending buffet items. After a few days, a few too many drinks, and a couple of extra pounds added to your body, you decide that evening to take part in the murder mystery party. You'll love that kind of thing, the whodunit caper. You remember the last time you played and the killer was the servant who committed the murder with a lead pipe in the ballroom. Halfway through your game, people start running around covered in blood, and of course you think it's all part of the fun. It isn't. Somebody has actually been murdered. What we just told you is a true story, and now we'll explain. Number 10, the cruise ship murder. In 2017, the Emerald Princess set off from Seattle with 3,400 on board on a journey to Southeast Alaska. One of those passengers would not survive the trip. During the night of the murder mystery party, a couple on the ship were having a domestic dispute, one that would end with the man beating his wife to death. Soon, staff and medical officers were on the scene, and what they saw before them was a woman covered in blood. A ship security officer subdued the man and put him in handcuffs. Some passengers on the ship had heard screams, and some would later see staff with the woman's blood all over them. One passenger later told the media people were running through the hall with blood all over them and trying to get security. They actually thought this was some kind of hoax, just part of the game. But of course, they were wrong. It was later revealed that the woman had died from blunt force trauma to her head and face. The man admitted to what he had done and is now in jail. He could be facing a life sentence. Have stranger things happened on cruise ships? The answer is yes. And like always, we'll leave the best until last. Maybe best is the wrong word. We should probably have said worst. Number 9. Poop cruise. In 2013, some of the 4,000 people aboard a Carnival Triumph cruise ship woke up to the smell of smoke and the sound of fire alarms. The ship was on fire. What happened shortly after was the ship lost power and was left stranded in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so the fire was extinguished. Surely things couldn't have been that bad. Well, things were really bad. You see, those 4,000 people on that ship had no air conditioning. Most of the time, they were left without any lights, and some people complained later that they had to go without water and food. So why was it called the poop cruise? That's because the toilets weren't functioning and sewage was building up. 4,000 people created quite a lot of poop in the 4 days that the ship was stranded. People later sued the company and described in dramatic detail how people were huddled together on the ship's decks, not knowing how things would turn out. They explained that the human sewage from overflowing toilets made its way to the deck and there was a terrible stench. We guess this might sound quite amusing for some of our viewers, but the experience was traumatic for those passengers. They had paid for what was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime and instead spent days in darkness in a sea of poop. This is how one woman later described the experience when she was testifying in court. I did not get physically injured, I got mentally injured. I think about the smell, the stench, and the bad things. All the memories come flooding back and I can't stop them. Another witness said she and others thought they were going to die, and if not, then just get ill from the sewage. She said in court, there was lots of urine and feces all the way up to the rim of everyone. The poop cruise was certainly a holiday in hell, but as you'll see, things could have been worse. Number 8, mass sickness. On the poop cruise, most of the injuries that were sustained were of a mental kind, but on a cruise ship that left the U.S. for the Caribbean in 2010, a lot of people became extremely ill all of a sudden. Imagine this, you're on a ship with over 1,800 guests, and suddenly hundreds of them just start throwing up and come down with a bad case of diarrhea. Passengers go out on the deck and then suddenly something shifts in their stomach. They vomit all over the place, and right across from them another person vomits. It becomes kind of a vomitathon. It's actually what you might call a viral relay. What happened is a stomach virus had been passed from one person to another, and in the end, the virus affected more than 400 people on the ship. To stop the spread, people were told to wash their hands often and, better still, isolate themselves in the cabin. This is not exactly what you call a colorful vacation in the Caribbean, holed up in a cabin waiting for the mass pooping and vomiting to die down. And that's the problem with cruise ships. If one person brings a virus on board, it can quickly spread. We think you all know a story when this recently happened, but that's a tale for another day. Number 7, bad weather. You've all seen the videos of cruise ships having a hard time in bad weather, and usually the ships can handle it, even though passengers might get thrown around a bit. But sometimes ships just get stranded and they can't sail out of the madness. This happened in 2019 off the coast of Norway. Massive 30-foot waves rocked the Viking cruise ship that led to engine failure. The problem was it was too dangerous to keep people on the ship, but it was also too dangerous to send boats in to evacuate them. Before that happened, some waves were so big that they broke down doors of the cabins and threw people across their rooms. They were, of course, just a little concerned that the ship might go down. The authorities were concerned too, and soon helicopters started arriving to airlift people from the ship. No one died on this occasion. We'll get around to death soon. Number 6. Spying. This one is just plain weird. It happened on the Caribbean-headed Carnival cruise ship in 2018. A couple on that ship one night were in their cabin about to watch some TV. Suddenly, the man noticed something weird, something that looked like a small camera pointing at them. The camera was aimed at the bed. The man went over to investigate, and later he told the court that it was working, so someone was likely watching them. The company denied that the camera was turned on, but it did admit that there was a camera. The couple said that this was hogwash, that they said they could see clearly that the camera was working. The guy said it was warm when he touched it. This one remains a bit of a mystery. The camera was turned over to the FBI, and we don't know what happened after that. Number 5. It's a stick-up. It wouldn't surprise you if we told you that someone had stolen someone's belongings while on a cruise ship. Hey, there are just some folks in this world that can't resist themselves when they see a smartphone or a wallet lying around. But in 2012, 22 Carnival cruise passengers were robbed, which is quite out of the ordinary. They were on an excursion at the Mexico seaside resort of Puerto Vallarta when it happened. The robbery wasn't actually on the cruise ship. It happened when people were taking a bus back to the ship. Some guys in the middle of the street didn't get out of the way, and the bus had no choice but to stop. After that, the men, what the media called bandits, got on the bus holding guns in their hands. The shocked tourists were told to hand over everything of value. That included their watches, jewelry, money, cameras, passports, and anything else that was of any value. The Mexican authorities said this was a rare event, but the cruise liner later said that this particular tour would now be suspended. Number 4. Falling off. So you've probably heard that now and again people fall off of cruise ships, but what you might not know is that it happens quite often. In 2016, a young woman on the Carnival Liberty had been in the bar, and it turned out that she had a grand total of 19 drinks, which is a hell of a lot for someone who weighed just 120 pounds. The woman then went to the deck around 2 a.m. and sat on a deck chair that was right next to the railing of the ship. She was never seen again. Now, you probably think that this is a very rare thing to happen, but do you know that from the year 2000 to the year 2018, 284 people fell off of cruise ships, and another 41 people fell from large ferries? That's quite a lot. We found a few more recent cases of this happening too, and the outcome is usually not good, although sometimes people do get saved. There have also been a few cases where people purposefully jumped off a ship. Number 3. The Pirates of Somalia. In 2005, a cruise ship traveling off the coast of Somalia came under attack from pirates. This must have been pretty scary for the passengers, because when the pirates got close to the ship, they fired automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. There were only 302 passengers on the ship, and most of them were from the US and the UK. One American woman who was interviewed explained to the media what she witnessed. She said, "My daughter saw the pirates out the window. There were at least 3 RPGs that hit the ship."
Our families are facing a crisis. Extreme weather is forcing families to leave their homes, abandon small businesses, suffer through
ship, one in a stateroom 4 doors down from our cabin. Yeah, can you imagine that? A British guy on the ship said he saw the pirates firing, and he said one of the rockets from the rocket launchers went right through the liner and into a suite where some people were staying. Thankfully, the ship managed to keep the pirates away using a water hose and a long-range acoustic device. None of the passengers were hurt during the ordeal, although one of the crew members was injured. It was quite an unusual thing to happen since cruise ships have so many people on them. Pirates tend to go for cargo ships, where there's a lot of loot to be had and only a few crew members. Number 2. A modern disaster. You all know about the sinking of the Titanic, but some of you might not have heard of the 2013 Costa Concordia disaster. That ship was sailing with 3,222 passengers and 1,023 crew on Friday the 13th when it hit a rock. A hole was torn in the hull, and water started to get into the ship. Meanwhile, the gigantic ship was turning on its side. 32 passengers and crew died during the event, and after it happened, the captain of the ship was imprisoned on a charge of manslaughter. He also abandoned the ship to save his own life, and so he became known as Captain Coward. Some people say he was made a scapegoat for the disaster, although the Coast Guard captain that shouted, "Get on board, damn it," didn't think that was the case. Number 1. Titanic II. One of the worst disasters that ever happened on a passenger ship happened in 1914, and the ship was called RMS Empress of Ireland. Those old passenger ships were not exactly cruise ships, but back then they were about as close as you can get to a modern-day cruise ship. Passengers on board could float in the luxury of a first-class suite, or they could get the much cheaper second and third-class cabins. While sailing through thick fog on the St. Lawrence River in North America, the ship's crew could barely see a thing, and then, suddenly, bang! It was hit by the Norwegian collier SS Storstad in the early hours of the morning. The disaster happened around 2 years after the Titanic went down and killed around 1,500 people, so the ship was equipped with ample lifeboats and had watertight compartments. No one ever thought something like the Titanic disaster could ever happen again. It actually took just 14 minutes for the ship to fill with water and sink, so there wasn't much time to get the people into the lifeboats. Out of the 1,477 people on board the ship, 1,012 of them died. It was Titanic the sequel. The disaster killed the rich and the poor, and it took the lives of quite a few notable people. The survivors were all picked up while floating in the water, with only 4 children amongst them. 134 children in total died that fateful day. One of the reasons that so many people died was because the impact was so sudden and just about everyone was fast asleep at the time of the collision. In the aftermath, the Norwegians said the Empress of Ireland was at fault, but the captains and the crew on that ship said it was the Norwegian ship that had caused the crash. One of the survivors, who was one of those saved kids, later said in interviews that she remembered how beautiful the ship was, calling it a floating hotel. She said she remembered how wonderfully the orchestra played. One night she went to bed and was woken up by a bang. Before she knew it, she was floating in the water holding on to some wreckage. She was eventually saved, but lost both her parents. Now we think you just have to watch this amazing video. Where did all the bodies on Titanic disappear? Or watch 50 insane facts about Titanic you didn't know.